Cinematographer Helena Hutchins was deliberately killed by Alec Baldwin. She had seen or overheard him discussing the Saget Missive on the set of Rust and confronted him about it. Actress Kirstie Alley was murdered. Possible that the method was that she was forced to jump to her death, and the issue was her objection to the 2020 U.S. election theft. Actor Lance Reddick was murdered. The issue was the Saget Missive. Possible that he was garroted. Actor Jeremy Renner was not injured in a snowplow accident, but was attacked by enforcer William Forsythe. He elected to take the blame for writing the Saget Missive, though it's questionable how he could know enough to write what was written unless he's very talkative and stealthful. In his television interview, he mentioned something he'd done that had hurt people. Actress Annie Wersching was murdered. There was a gathering at her execution. Possible that the method was throwing or dropping her from a ledge. She objected, generally, to all the secret awful activity, including the threatening response to the Saget Missive. Comedian Gilbert Gottfried was killed shortly after the Saget Missive was discovered, around March 27, 2022. His date of death is listed as April 12, 2022. As mentioned earlier, Gottfried was part of the leak that also claimed the lives of Bernie Mac and Norm Macdonald. Actor Isaac Cappy did not commit suicide and was indeed killed for discussing what Wikipedia more or less accurately calls a cabal of Satan-worshipping child molesters who run a global child sex trafficking ring. Madeleine McCann was kidnapped as a part of their activity and has been held captive as a sex slave. Her kidnapping was asked for by Prince Charles. Insiders at higher levels can have access to her. It's possible that her location is on Carrer del Golf de Leo in Palma, Mallorca, Spain, possibly number 17. Night Court actors Harry Anderson, 2018, shot in the face, Charlie Robinson, 2021, and Marky Post, 2021, less than a month after Robinson, were murdered. Anderson had objected to earlier murders, including those of actor Bill Paxton, baseball players Gary Carter and Dave Henderson, and particularly that of co-star Florence Hallop, who objected to the system and was killed. Anderson had talked to Robinson about Hallop. Robinson was pumped for information about Anderson after being clapped in the hand. Post was then visited by Bill Clinton, who made sexual advances on her, which she refused, before clapping her with a joy buzzer. Musician Rick Ocasek of the band The Cars was killed by the Clintons in a ritualistic ceremony involving torture after being ratted out by musician Billy Joel. Musician David Bowie was killed in a similar manner after musician Eric Clapton sounded the alarm. In both cases, they had knowledge about what you could call the California Situation 91 to 98, an information leak in which musicians were killed, including Jerry Garcia, Nicky Hopkins, and Dino Valenti, aka Chet Powers. The California Situation involved leaks from musician Philip Taylor Kramer, who played bass for Iron Butterfly. Musician Lee Underwood, who played in Tim Buckley's band, was chainsawed in 4 in a Satanist method known as crossing. Kramer's disappearance and death is still considered a mystery to this day. Kramer had knowledge of California drug smuggling, the kind which was reported by LAPD detective Mike Rupert at a press conference with CIA Director John Deutsch in 1996. Rupert, who published a website called From the Wilderness, incidentally, did not commit suicide as was reported, but was murdered, carried out by a Lance Corporal Ron Cummins. Musician Graham Parsons and tattoo artist Norman Sailor Jerry Collins were killed because they found out about the California drug smuggling operation, which was overseen by Richard Nixon, president at the time, and longtime high-level member in the group. Musician George Michael was killed over his knowledge of the illicit sexual behavior of now-disgraced TV host Jimmy Savile. Actor Philip Seymour Hoffman tried to go on the record about the group in an interview, possibly with someone like Charlie Rose. The piece was quashed, and Hoffman was executed. He was killed by the crossing method, and his death was reported as a heroin overdose. Actor Bill Paxton was murdered for being a threat to the system and objecting to 9/11. He was killed using the motorcycle gang method of drawing and quartering. Actor John Ritter was killed for objecting to the system while starring on 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. He had issues with 9/11. Actor Michael Kenneth Williams was murdered, clapped on the hand with a joy buzzer by George W. Bush. He had objections to the political scenario, which included the COVID-19 pandemic, which was deliberately foisted on the world by these people in order to pave the way for mass mail-in voting in the 2020 U.S. presidential election, enabling a surge of fake votes at the end for Biden. Actor Ed Asner was killed in 2021 over objections to the Clintons' willingness to kill people with the COVID-19 pandemic. Actor Ned Beatty was killed for the same reason by George W. Bush. Actor Norman Lloyd, at age 106, was killed by Hillary Clinton with a joy buzzer to the hand for raising objections to their handling of Donald Trump's opposition. Cheers casting director Stephen Kolzak was killed for confronting actor Woody Harrelson with information about his childhood, particularly knowledge that his father Charles Harrelson had committed 2 major political assassinations: the Grassy Knoll shooting of U.S. President John F. Kennedy, which was ordered incidentally by Tammany Hall boss Carmine DeSapio, and the killing of Martin Luther King, which was ordered incidentally by Georgia Governor Lester Maddox. There is an in memoriam card for Kolzak at the end of a Cheers episode from 1990. Actor Hang S. Moore was killed for trying to get into the system and violating protocol by not offering any children. His killing served as the initiation for members Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Brad Hall. Actor Anthony Tony Hamilton of the 1980s reboot of Mission Impossible was murdered using a method employed during that decade. He was injected with AIDS-infected blood from a sample drawn from actor Steve Tracy, who had appeared on Little House on the Prairie as Nellie's husband. For some reason, Rick Moranis' character in the film My Blue Heaven wears a San Diego Padres hat while flying a helicopter as a copy of Hamilton's character wearing the same hat while flying a helicopter. Actor Jim J. Bullock became HIV positive by the same method. He was a serious threat to leak word of the system. In his instance, it was about requiring the show's young actresses to have sex with particular men on request. Actor Ted Knight, Bullock's co-star on Too Close for Comfort, was also murdered, killed over objections to a feature of the system whereby older actors are required to pay more to participate. And days earlier, actor William Frawley was killed over problems with the same feature of the system. Actor and game show host Bert Convy was killed for the same reason. The death of actor Anthony Perkins was actually a homicide over the same issue, refusal to pay to keep in. In his case, and in the case of many older actors in general, you have to pay to keep them from killing you. Many older actors' deaths have actually been homicides. For example, comedian Joan Rivers, sadly, was not financially healthy enough to keep them at bay. There are decade-based fees. Lauren Bacall was killed after turning 80 and refusing to pay. Betty White refused to pay for living past age 100. The deaths of Lucille Ball and Cary Grant were murders. Ball and Grant were killed by enforcer Lawrence Tierney. Other well-known actor deaths were cover-ups for non-payment. Actor Robin Williams did not commit suicide but was killed for non-payment. In the 1980s, Hill Street Blues actor Michael Conrad was declared to be dying of cancer in a similar situation. His Hill Street co-star Keel Martin found himself in the same boat a few years later while appearing on the Fox sitcom Second Chance. A well-known victim of the AIDS injection method of carrying out executions was Rock Hudson, who couldn't figure out how none of his sexual partners had the virus. Director Stanley Kubrick was killed by Bill and Hillary Clinton, with Bill Gates in attendance at a private screening of Eyes Wide Shut on Kubrick's property for making the film in the first place, as its contents resembled too closely the real thing. The method involved putting Ipecac in the iced tea, and the Clintons taking sips and then spitting them out to sell Kubrick on drinking it. The recent death of the Obama's personal chef, Tafari Campbell, was related to objections he raised about actor Jamie Foxx's recent mysterious hospitalization. Fox, incidentally, seems to have been beaten for raising objections to the system, urging leadership to take a vote on getting rid of it. Technically, this is unrelated to the system, but DJ Stephen Twitch Boss was murdered by Matthew McConaughey for refusing the closeted McConaughey's sexual advances and then threatening to tell people about the incident. Unfortunately for Boss, McConaughey was armed with a joy buzzer. You could say it's an offshoot of the Hollywood sex system. Along those lines, there had been in place a practice where aspiring male TV actors could, or in some cases could only, advance their careers by having gay sex with MTM Productions-affiliated producers Tom Patchett and Jay Tarsis. It was knowledge of this system that led to the murder of actor Paul Mache, who had portrayed an orderly on the first season of MTM's Saint Elsewhere, which debuted in 1982. On Mache's IMDb page, in the trivia section, it is noted that Mache and his ex-wife, Judy Ann Jordan, both died in road accidents in the same year, 1983. While on a clandestine adventure with Roger, President Bill Clinton shot and killed comedian Bill Hicks for including real information about the group's activities in his stand-up comedy, especially the part about new presidents having to watch a film of the Kennedy assassination that's never been seen before and looks suspiciously like it's from the grassy knoll. Clinton killed him without saying a word. Comedian Mitch Hedberg was murdered over insider information about 9/11. Actor Joel Grey was murdered over objections to the system, vulnerable at age 75. Soap opera actor Andrew Cavolt of As the World Turns was sexually abused as a teenager by cast members Elizabeth Hubbard, Eileen Fulton, Catherine Hayes, and Helen Wagner. Soap opera actor Michael David Morrison of As the World Turns was killed for threatening to talk about the sexual practices of Guiding Light actor Ron Raines, who would openly masturbate on set. Actor Jackie Earle Haley became an actual pedophile after portraying a pedophile in the film Little Children. Enforcers over the years have included actors such as Pat Corley, about 43 killed, the aforementioned Lawrence Tierney, about 128 or so killed, Alan Hale Sr., over 300 killed, his son Alan Hale Jr., about 87 killed, William Holden, over 75 killed, the aforementioned George McDaniel, around 100 killed, Norm Alden, about 38 killed, Charlie Murphy, Eddie Murphy's brother, around 49 or so killed, current enforcer William Forsythe, over 30 killed at this point. Donald Trump's ex-wife Ivana Trump was killed by enforcer William Forsythe. The group has offices at the W. Averill Harriman State Office Building in Albany, New York. Former New York State Governor Harriman was a high-level member of the group, enough that he traveled to the Soviet Union in 1983 to negotiate with the Soviets after the issue with the downed Korean airliner, which, incidentally, was shot down by NATO to try to frame the Soviets. NATO also tried to provoke the Soviets into launching missiles in another incident around that time, but as it has been documented, a single Russian military officer refused to give the order to retaliate until he had confirmation. As mentioned earlier, actor Bill Paxton did not die from complications from surgery, but was killed by the crossing method. Actor Bruno Kirby was also killed by the same method. The method is used against people who demonstrate insolence towards Baphomet. Baphomet is basically just the bigger system, bigger than any of them by virtue of its age, that empowers and enriches them. Kind of like people in 12 Steps whose higher power is the group. And it's like Baphomet is the satanic, demonic beast child of Queen Elizabeth I that lives on by replacing, maintaining, and sometimes enlarging its system of human being organs through succession planning. And one of the publicly known associations these people have long maintained, reaching back to here and earlier, is known as Freemasonry, long suspected of secret nefarious influence. Retired baseball player Phil Niekro was killed after being clapped on the hand in public, possibly by Jimmy Carter. He died in his sleep after feeling sick and going home. Broadcaster and actor Bob Uecker is, apparently, a major league leaker, and reported Niekro to high-level biker leader Rick Sutcliffe. He had information about 9/11 funding, that it was bankrolled by ballplayer, former member of George W. Bush's Texas Rangers when Bush was club president, and bank owner Nolan Ryan.